Hey everybody, make sure you check out this week's episode of the Parts Room Podcast. We're going to talk about brand names of certain components, namely suspensions, and whether or not they're really that important, or is it just a price tag? So make sure you guys tune in and check us out on Spotify if you want to see the video, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcast, and we'll see you there. There's so much emphasis nowadays placed on brands, and I kind of wanted to dig into that a little bit and like where does that come from? Like the saying is always you get what you pay for, and quality over quantity and stuff like that. But is that necessarily still true? Because take Rough Country for instance. When you look at their products now versus what we used to look at, is it as bad as we always thought it was? The price points, there's a lot of stuff we want to kind of dig through in that and unpack when we talk about brands, because that's one thing that we try to always lean on here at Exodus was kind of sticking to some of the brands that are a little bit more, I don't want to say prestigious because that's not really the word, but or brands that are kind of known for their quality. It just so happens that they tend to cost more. But is that still the case? Not necessarily that we're gravitating towards selling cheaper product or cheaper suspension systems or lifts, whatever you want to call it. But it may turn out that sometimes you don't have a choice, that you have to use something that's, not a premium or premier kit. So I think overall what people need to take away from this particular podcast is, yes, to some extent the brands are important, but what you really need to be looking at whenever you're looking at these brands is the customer service itself. And how if you decide to go that route and do some sort of budget suspension for a couple of years before you move into the full-on coilovers or bypass shocks or whatever you're going to do, you want to look into these companies and want to make sure that the suspension that you are going to put on there is going to lift the vehicle correctly, because there are suspension, like I said, the Skyjacker lift. It is going to lift the vehicle correctly. It will do everything that you need it to do. And it's going to be cheap, and they have good customer service. It's a good example of one that you could put on there and go for a couple of years before you step into the premium stuff, and give yourself some time to really decide what you want to do with that vehicle before you spend a bunch of money. Because, man, there's guys out there that go at it full bore right from the get-go, and then they're like, man, I don't think I like coilovers, because coilovers aren't for everybody. We've established that there is a place for the premium brand names and there is a place for the budget names. If you're just getting into this, don't get sucked into that mentality that just because you read on a forum that a such and such brand is it's cheap, it's no good, it's blah, blah, blah. Don't get sucked into that. Go out and meet some people face to face and talk to them about what they've done with their builds and how they've went through them. Pick you a good shop based on others' recommendations and talk to those guys and see what they recommend, because I think a good shop is going to give you a plan if it's not in your budget. And now, ideally, if that's what you're going to do, if for a fact you're going to run 37s on that thing, and for a fact you're going to go out and wheel it, then by all means, move up to those more expensive lifts and go at it from there. And don't waste your money on it. But if this is the first Jeep you've ever owned or first Bronco you've ever owned, don't run into this thing head first and spend tens of thousands of dollars modifying it only to find out you're not going to enjoy that thing after all, and you might want to get rid of it. Or there's a few different branches that you can go on when you start getting out of those budget lists that you can go different directions. It doesn't mean that one's necessarily better than the other, but it does mean that you are going to spend a lot more money than you did if you just stayed in that budget boost or budget lift realm. Yeah. So it's easier to figure it out when you've only spent a couple grand. It's easier to figure out how you want to go about the rest of that build, or that ultimately what that build needs to look at, than if you dig yourself into a hole right off the bat where you spent $10,000, wheels, tires, and lift and install and all that stuff. And then you figure out, oh, wait, I think my style and wheeling would be better suited in this other direction. So,
yeah, that's an expensive lesson. And I think, to reinforce your point, if you're coming out of an F-150 or a Chevy truck,
yeah,
and you're moving over into a Gladiator,
it's a completely different driving experience.
But budget boost that thing, put your wheels and tires on it, get used to it. Make sure it's something you like, because that is going to ride it generically as good as it's ever going to ride. Because when you go full potato, like we did with Rooster and like we did with yours, that's a different ride.
It's a different ride. It's not necessarily a bad ride.
No, and I like it, but it's
different.
A different ride.
Yeah.
And you're going to spend a lot of money to find out whether you like that or not.
Yeah, and I mean, you can go and ride around in somebody else's vehicle that's built the way you think you want to build it, but I don't think that unless they let you borrow it for a month of just straight driving it and wheeling it, whenever you want, I don't think that you're not going to grasp the full experience of what that driving experience is like every single day in that vehicle. Because let's be honest with you, most people that are buying a JL and lifting it up, or a JK and lifting it up, I'd say nowadays a lot of people are buying JKs and building like more extreme trailer queens out of them,
right?
As opposed to the JLs and JTs. So let's use the JL and JT as that example. Most people that are buying those things and building them up to 37s are still daily driving them, especially now that the diesel is available. It seems like we're seeing more of a little bit more extreme build out of the diesel guys, because they know they have the power to sustain that. So daily driving it at the same time as you're taking it off and off-roading it. So you're going to be stuck in that thing, and most of the time that you're driving it, you're not going to be off-road. So you have to build that thing. If you're not going to be trailering everywhere, it's not a dedicated off-road only vehicle, that you need to build it in a way that you're actually going to enjoy driving it every day. You're just not going to know that without trying a few different things out. And it's easier to try out the cheap stuff and kind of at least get the fundamentals of those different types of suspensions out of the cheap stuff. And then you can move up to more expensive stuff.
And the larger percentage of people are just daily driving it. And the lift is nothing more than aesthetics, the look of it that they want.
Yeah. And I will say this, that there is a difference in ride quality between the cheaper, the more expensive boutique lifts versus the more budget-friendly stuff. You will typically find that the more expensive stuff does, in fact, ride a better quality. And that's why we tend to sell what we sell. One last time, those guys that don't know what they're going to do and they just want it to look good, then I would start out with that a good budget lift and take it out, use it, go wheeling, do some light wheeling with your friends and stuff, and see where you want to go with it.
The Jeeper Starter Pack.
Make it about the adventure, not about the vehicle.
Yeah.
Then you're gonna have a great time.
All the time, every single time. So as long as it's safe and reliable, that's the biggest takeaway from those. So.